Hey now, welcome to the dirty side of the track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was the Imola Grand Prix, or the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, or the really long name Grand Prix. It may have been a bit of a stinker, but it left us with a good taste in our mouth? Question. How are you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You know what? There is a saying in football that it's a game of two halves, and if the first half stinks, you got the second half to look forward to. It's a bit of a cliche, but I think that might apply today. Although I'm not even going to be as generous and call it a race of two halves because I'm not even sure half of it was good.
No.
But I think it was the definition of a slow burner. Let's give it that. We were worried going into this weekend that Imola's kind of a little bit of a high-speed Monaco because this is like a really, really old original track when cars were about a meter wide. I think these cars don't look like they have a lot of room to pass on this one, so we'll get there. We will get there and make our minds up and pull the bones out of the race weekend, as we say. So we got news and social, your video vault as usual, race weekend review, fantasy points. Don't know if they've updated or not, but then we have a preview of Monaco, which maybe today was a little bit of foreshadowing for Monaco. Who knows?
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that because I actually was texting some friends about it. But as we get into the news, as Rob said, the week started. How did the week start? So first thing, two newsworthy items. We recorded last week before Abby Pulling was the first woman to win in British F4. And so that is amazing, great achievement. As everybody who listens to us knows, we always keep an eye on all motorsport, and we're obviously excited about watching the Academy and watching Abby Pulling and what she's achieving. So that's cool for British F4. Great job by Abby. And then actually, I think I may have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure listener Andy was at the race and got her autograph.
Oh,
I believe
okay.
I saw that on Twitter, but this week at work has been a blur. So if I saw that on Sunday, I may have forgotten it. But Andy, I'm pretty sure I saw that right. One of the reasons this week was a blur is because it started off with a bang. And I've been cautiously optimistic. I've been guarded with my optimism about Chicago ever having an F1 race. It does not make sense. We already have 3 races in the United States. We have a race in Canada. We have a race in Mexico. That's 5 in North America. What are the odds of it being a 6th? And what are the odds of it being in Chicago? Well, fastest pit stop, who now has to be relegated to the you make stuff up bin. They said the contract to bring Formula One to Chicago has been signed! Exclamation point exclusive. And they go on through the reasons why they believed it was true and commingled it with the idea of the fact we're building a new NFL stadium along the lakefront for $4 or $5 or $6 billion or whatever the crazy amount of money they're going to do is. And they said, oh, this is going to happen. And then within a couple hours, it was all shot down. And I sat here like a sad puppy dog crying into my paws, just saying, it's never going to happen.
Worse than that, you'd already gone big on it and shared this from the account, and you'd gone all in on it, and then everything kind of started falling down with people coming out saying, they're not naming the sources. Never trust a story that says according to sources and don't cite them. And then everyone else started piling in, and then I can't even remember if it was official from F1 or if it came from something in Chicago, but they basically said there are no contracts signed. This is not happening, or at least not now. So all your dreams went up in smoke.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
But and if you want to type a little louder there, Brian, I could really hear the keys being a bit louder would be even better.
Sorry.
That's just you writing an angry letter to Fastest Pit Stop about how they brought your dreams down, isn't it? But
Yeah.
As that kind of came down, what then kind of started coming up and started gaining a bit of traction, but again, no sources, so I don't know if it's true. But now F1 looks to expand into Asia, with Thailand being the front runner. Now, Asia does make more sense than putting another race into North America, I guess, to expand the market base. But you know, I'm not sure. This seems to be the time of year for pick a random country out of the lucky dip and say that F1's going there. But
Well, and we haven't done the South African rumors again for a while, so those should be back up in a couple weeks.
yeah, exactly. That'll be back, and and whatever follows after that. And then also in the week we got Albon signs a multi-year contract. Now, are you familiar with the card game Uno, Brian?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. there was an Uno meme that summed this up for me perfectly, which is multi-year contracts are killing us that all want to predict silly seasons because we don't know when they end. So it takes all the fun out of knowing when we get, we knew 2024 was going to be a banger because we had all these published end dates. Multi-year deals are a nightmare. It's like, why are they so reluctant to do it? And this meme went round of an Uno card that said, reveal the length of your multi-year contract or pick up 25, and then it's got this guy there sat like with the entire deck, and he's got F1 above his head, F1 team bosses. Because why can't they tell us how long these things are for? Why does it have to be so secret? It's not fair, Brian.
I agree. Although Barretto did come out with a note that says it's at least until the end of 27, but then someone else came out with a note and said there's options involved. So again, who really knows? And then, like, to your point, when does it end? Well, why don't we layer on some potential team and or driver options so we have even less transparency into when it ends, how that can end, who might end it, when it could end. Anyway. But yeah, so to your point, we saw that happening, and then that's obviously one seat at Williams. And by the way, I think that's a great deal for James Vowles and Williams. I don't think you're going to get a guy of the talent of Albon to come in cold to Williams right now. And he's just... When people talk about him for other seats, they acknowledge the talent that he just keeps developing. So the other Williams seat, on the other hand, James Vowles talked about meeting with Logan Sargent. We've had a direct conversation. It's a very hard conversation when you do it, but the simple matter of the fact is he is at risk. We are talking to a few other drivers because we have to get our 25, 26, and 27 lineups correct. In the next few weeks, you'll see some potential news. Also, on the next day, we then saw Valtteri leaving the Williams hospitality building at Imola. Autosport, we'll find out if they're any better than Fastest Pit Stop, but Autosport reports they understood that Valtteri had a 15-minute meeting with James Vowles. So, lots of things afoot and moving. It's going to be fascinating. There's still a lot of open seats and a lot of available drivers. So, Unfortunately, I think this is going to be a domino at a time situation, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because as this pool of potential seats gets smaller, I think it's going to have to be like the game of musical chairs. All of a sudden, the music's going to stop and everyone's just going to go running towards a seat, because we can't just keep having these onesie-twosie announcements, because at some point, well, unless they do, they go down to like the last one or two seats that are left. We've got about 7 drivers that are all in. That are all in the mix for it. I guess it's a great negotiating tactic when you're the team principals, because there's a bigger pool out there than I think that there are seats available. So
agreed. And Mercedes lost a couple other folks from their team. Loic Serra and Jerome D'Ambrosio are joining Ferrari from Mercedes. So a lot of folks moving around, not just drivers, but team folks, engineers, and technical leads. And the last thing I have that in the news that I had, Rob, a question for you. It's a British expression, right? Like a ding-dong thing where it's back and forth. Is that like it's a ding-dong battle, or it's a... No? Do I have that wrong?
I don't know. I mean, I know the phrase ding-dong, but I wouldn't have... Do I associate it with back and forth? If you told me it was a ding-dong battle, to me that means it was a fantastic. It was a ding-dong race. It was a ding-dong battle. It was a ding-dong boxing match. It doesn't mean back and forth, I don't think.
Here in the States, anyway. It would be somebody who's a bit dim-witted. Like Rob, he's a real ding-dong. But
okay.
Yeah, and so anyway, I was trying to find the right term for this, because now we have a back and forth legal battle with Günther Steiner and Haas. And the very short version is... Günther sued Haas for monies owed and other things. And now Haas is suing Günther for things he put in his book. In particular, trademarks and logos that he used for personal financial gain and illicit profit. Oh, come on, Haas. What do you want him to do? Call the team Has and just take an A out? I mean, we know where he worked. He can't use pictures of the car? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I don't... What's he supposed to do? Like blur them all out? Like when you get like those, witnesses that aren't allowed to have they've got pixelated faces.
Pixelate the Haas logo on the car.
As if we all won't know what it was. So just, while you were telling that story, I just quickly Googled it. And yes, according to the Urban Dictionary of Ding Dong, North American is a silly or foolish person, as you said.
Correct.
British is an evenly and hard-fought match. The game was an exciting ding-dong battle. So there you go.
All right, so I was a little off on the back
Yeah, a
and
little
forth
off. But you know
aspect,
what?
but it
I'm
was
going to give
part
you
of it. It's
points for
part of it.
trying and trying to embrace the British culture. Well done, Brian.
I'm going there. I got to be ready. I don't want to walk into a
Just walk
restaurant and
round
like
and
I'd
just
like to order the ding dongs.
excuse me, can I get a ding dong cup of tea? Or...
That'd be a real bummer if I could get a ding dong.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
anything else, Rob, or shall we go to the vault?
No, I think on that note, we should go to the video vault.
Let's do it. All right. So this week, as I referenced, it was a little bit of a busy week for me, and so I didn't have time to really plumb the depths of YouTube, but I do have three things that I'd like to highlight that are at least worth a watch. I wouldn't say any of these are must-watches. First, the second edition of the Lollipop Man Miami Grand Prix. I referenced this last week. I said I hadn't seen the second yet, assuming it had dropped. It had not dropped. It dropped this week. So good job, Lollipop Man, breaking the sprint weekend of Miami into 2 episodes and 1 each week. It is good, and that's why I hadn't got it yet. The second is Lando Norris plays Unpopular Opinion on BBC Radio 1. I really enjoyed this. It's not a must-watch, but it's fun just to see kind of people outside their element and answering questions, and they're interesting questions. It also caused me to go down a rabbit hole. I used to watch a lot of these Unpopular Opinion on BBC One years ago, and I went back down the same rabbit hole and enjoyed the same things I did from 4 or 5 years ago when I found this thread, because obviously I'm not a regular BBC Radio 1 listener. So
Well, you will be when you're over there, Brian.
yeah, exactly. And so anyway, this is worth it to see Lando on there. It was the one fascinating one, which I won't talk too much about, is about a tattoo. So check it out. It's 8 minutes long. And the last one is Max Verstappen says avoid the sausage curbs on the Oracle virtual laps, 2 minutes long on Oracle Red Bull Racing. He and I forgot who else, someone else. It's not someone I recognize quickly. We're driving around Imola, and they talk about how to avoid the curbs. And at Yank the Mike, you're the best, sent this over because they basically rip on Charles' engineer. The guy doing the driving asks Max a question, and Max goes, "We are checking. I come back to you." And so I thought that was so great. It just tickled my heart because we use that all the time. Obviously, it's a great sound.
We'll come back to you.
And so that was the third video that'll be in the link. So thanks, Mike, for sending that in. And with that, I'm going to close it unless you have any other videos.
No, I don't.
Take us away.
Well, actually, I did get to watch quite a bit of practice. I had an absolute packed week like yourself at work, and then all of a sudden, kind of things came together. I was able to kind of watch. I think the first practice was like 7:30 in the morning, so that was kind of easy to watch once I got back from school bus duty. And actually, before we even get into kind of even practice and stuff, there were a few tributes to Senna either side of this weekend, and Seb seemed to be involved in most of it, to be honest. So before the weekend even kicked off, they were doing a run around the track, tribute to Senna and Ratzenberger. And Valtteri decided he was going to bike it because, he's a biker, so he's not going to be doing any of that running shenanigans. And then what did you catch here about Max?
Well, everyone was wearing the T-shirt, right? There was like a yellow T-shirt that everybody had, and all the drivers were wearing it. Valtteri had his like blue, bicycle thing. He didn't have it on, but everyone seems to know that like Valtteri's just being Valtteri, and no one really cared. But Max didn't have his T-shirt on yet. And when they were doing the picture, and F1 Twitter's like, "Oh, leave it to Max to not want to wear the T-shirt on." I'm like, "Come on, zip it." Sometimes F1 Twitter can be so stupid. And that was it for me. The highlight. That's actually when I logged on, saw that. I'm like, I don't have time for this junk this week, and logged it back off.
So yeah, practice. Sainz rocked up to practice sporting quite the moustache. I was a little worried at this point, thinking, are you now negating all the weight that you lost from having the appendix out? But and we'll get to that when the rest of the race weekend comes on. But yeah, quite the. I was going to say it was Magnum PI, but it was bigger. It was, maybe it was a Magnum PI mustache. But
I mean, think of, in all honesty, there have been 2, if you count Sainz as the second, 2 epic mustaches in Ferrari in the last 32 years. Nigel's.
Oh,
and
Nigel,
so.
Yeah.
And they're both wanting to be Magnum. So basically, that's when I saw that, I'm like, Mr. Thomas Magnum, welcome, sir.
And practice really didn't get a lot, but I'm gonna need you ready on a button here soon, Brian. If you've got your finger ready, while I do the first bit first. So Albon celebrated the multi-year contract by retiring his car and causing a red flag. So congratulations, Alex. Well done. But what we got the return of was a lot of people, I think, it's quite a bumpy track. People were trying to ride quite low, and we had a lot of our old friend popping up again. So do you want to play the noise? Yep.
I almost had deleted this.
You've got to keep it. Porpoising was back, man. I mean, there was like multiple drivers complaining of it.
Was it porpoising or was it just a bumpy track?
Well, this is what that is exactly the question the commentary team posed to each other. They said, is it just Imola's bumpy or are we seeing it? And then they, almost as if the TV directory kind of heard that, it went to an angle showing, I think it was an Alpine head on. And as he was decelerating, coming into, or braking, as they may say, coming into the corner, you just saw the good old bouncing going on again. Now, they think it was to do with the wind and the direction the wind was coming from, because for a couple of the practice sessions, the wind was blowing, I don't know, a way. Later on in the weekend, it was blowing another way. And when it was blowing that first way, it was causing all manner of problems. I think it was a headwind or tailwind or some kind of wind, but it was all wind related. And because of this, that's about as exciting as free practice got. People talking about the direction of wind and whether we had porpoising coming back. But we did see Oliver Behrman driving a Haas in FP1. And the one thing that I didn't realize that they called out on the commentary was that obviously Netflix thinks that this guy's got a big future because they had the camera crew following him around. Looks like he is going to be the subject of one of the episodes.
You know who they're following around?
Who?
Oliver! For some reason, the Top Gear Hammond Oliver scream just came back to me. I'm like, I had to go find that. Oliver! Yeah, I did see that they were following him around and that he was driving in FP1. It is exciting because you do see these young guys who have had a taste of F1, right? The Liams, the Olivers, and all these folks. There are viable, semi-proven opportunities to take some of those fleeting seats.
Yeah, potentially. And so the other thing that FP1, 2, and 3 kind of gave us, other than wondering whether wind was going to be an issue this weekend, was that McLaren looked fast again. Ferrari looked like they were turning things up because they like to turn up engine modes when they're in Italy. And Max the car wasn't really in love with Imola, and it was probably Max's skill that was getting the best out of it as opposed to them just being able to cruise around in a dominant car. And he really wasn't enjoying the middle sector. The middle sector was causing him all sorts of problems, and he left the track a few times. And I'm like, okay, this might well be spelling a spicy race, or at least one where Max doesn't drive off into the distance. So we got to quali, and it did it kind of. I mean, I think within about the first few minutes of quali, once we realized that they'd made the tweaks to the setup to the Red Bull, and we saw Max go to the top of the leaderboard, I was like, okay, well, maybe it's a return to form.
Or have they even turned the engine down a tiny bit for reasons that escape me? I don't know. But you're right. I was thinking the same thing. I didn't get to see any practice, but I did watch Friday night, the recap of FP1 and FP2, and I then watched the interviews. I loved Alex's answer for one last practice thing. I loved his answer for why he was off so many times. He's like, yeah, our car doesn't really like wind. Add that to the list of things the Williams car doesn't like.
It's not a fan of straights or corners as well, is it?
Yeah, we're not real good on the straights anymore. We're not that slippery. We're not good at high downforce tracks either. We're not good at slow, medium, or high-speed corners. Yeah,
it is an absolute skill. It's like the anti-Nui effect, right? It's like if you wanted to absolutely engineer a car, it seems, to be as awful as possible under any circumstance, they have absolutely nailed it this year.
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Just one last thing about Williams. If they're managing their parts in an Excel sheet, which we found out, is there a chance they're designing the car with an Etch-a-Sketch? I'm just saying. Would you like it to go up a stairs?
They had this amazing design, and the guy that was passing it to the chief aerodynamicist to take a look at, he shook it too hard as he passed it to him. It's gone!
It was all squares, though. Trust me, it'd be fine. Anyway, so we get to quali, and then I realized, because, again, I'd missed a lot of things, we didn't have Crofty, nor did we have Martin. And so we had Karun and Harry Benjamin? Who's that? He does stuff in the UK?
I don't know. Lots of people didn't even know who he was, and I saw a few threads calling him Ben on Twitter, and then people are
that's
going,
right. We still don't know.
It shows how much you've paid attention because that's the beginning of his last name. It's like, oh, okay.
But I think you're right. We saw quali. We saw Max was not as bad as we thought. We saw Fernando with the upgrades, who couldn't even get a decent time in Q1, ended up 19th. He was 20th until Logan decided to have his one lap time deleted because, Williams. And so it just, man, it was coming apart fast for a lot of people. It was fascinating. Hulk put in a stormer in Q1, just an absolute crazy lap. We saw a few of these. And then Gasly had a good lap. I'm like, what? In the Alpine? Did something happen that I missed? I know there was a lot of upgrades, everybody. We all talked about all the upgrades last week that would be coming this week. But I did not, and I know that's not what happened. Pierre just put in a great lap in Q1. But it was fascinating to watch some of these laps pop in. And then we saw in Q2, Yuki went up to second in quali. I'm like,
Yuki watched that Hulkenberg lap in Q1 and was like, I think I can do better than that. Hold my beer.
Oh man, it was. And then at the end of Q2, we had Danny Rick in 10th and Checo in 11th, and Checo's out there trying to update his lap and knock Danny Rick out for Q3. And I'm like, this is literally the battle Red Bull wants to see. The only difference is Danny Rick is still in the V-Carb RB, Minardi, Toro Rosso. I don't know how it's even fair at this point, and Checo can improve. And at this point, I'm thinking, I know you haven't been bad really this year, Checo, but this is not good.
No, this is not a good look when you've got, again, Max right at the top of the leaderboard. Okay, and the McLaren's bustling around him as well, but both McLaren drivers in equal machinery, both up at the top, annoying Max and trying to see if they could take pole. Max looking over his shoulder to see where his buddy is in equal machinery. You're not even joining me in Q3. Thanks, Checo. It's like, yeah, it's not a good look for him. I know both of us feel really guilty on kind of like almost like beating up on him a bit, but he just doesn't help himself.
I know.
Yeah. So who do we lose then in Q? So it was Checo, obviously. Oh yeah, Pierre, Alex, Lance, and Ocon. So we had two RBs and a Haas in Q3.
Wild.
That was yeah. I mean, keeps to be a bit of a running practice. That doesn't even make sense. A running theme that we keep talking about Haas this year.
I know.
We're in our third season now doing this pokey little pod, and for the first two, I think Haas were the laughing stock at the back, right? It was like, are they going to get a point? Will they? And last year they obviously did a bit better and they started coming forward, but this is definitely continual progress. I mean, this year they are almost not nailed on for points, but you're almost surprised if they don't score this year.
I mean, they have, I think, 7 points at this point so far, which is not a ton, but they're in 7th place in the Constructors. And they're not all that far behind RB. So it is interesting to see, the Haas improvement. And it helps when Sauber and Williams and Alpine are doing everything they can to just take up all 6 spots at the back of the drivers list by themselves. But yeah, then we had Q3, as we were saying, not just the two Haas's, not just the two RBs and a Haas, but we saw Max and Oscar and Lando put in some amazing laps. We saw the Ferraris not quite as fast as we thought they might be, given the pace that the McLaren showed, and Max. We can't say the Red Bulls. We can just say Max at this point. My favorite part of quali here, and at a lot of places, is when cars kind of sit like 2 corners away from the start-finish line and wait for someone to go by on a speed lap and grab onto their tail for a tow and kind of get across the start-finish line at full blast as best they can. But what we saw here was actually a little different. We had Hulkenberg and Max actually towing each other occasionally, weirdly. And I didn't understand that. Like, it was almost, I know it wasn't preset, but like they did this for each other. It was non-teammates.
This is the strange thing. So Hulkenberg almost openly admitted it and said that Max gave me a tow in Q2, which I think he didn't say that directly helped him to get to Q3, but let's just say that's what it was. That lap was the one that secured his Q3. So to pay him back, he gave him a tow, helped him down the first straight or whatever it was, and that was the lap that got Max pole. It's like, okay, I'm not really sure Max needs that help. If everyone could stop helping him, that'd be great.
That would be great. And then, of course, Oscar dropped from 2nd to 5th, which ended up being costly in the race. In the race of no overtakes, even though there were some on the straight. But anyway, enough of that. Shall we move to the race?
Didn't you want to? You put some stats in here for quali.
Yeah, Max tied Senna for 8 straight poles. There you go. There's a stat for you.
Oh, I'm very disappointed in you, Brian. In a weekend that was paying tribute to 30 years since the great Senna passed away, and at that same race, Max equals his record, and that's all the fever you're going to give it. I'm very disappointed in you, Brian. Let's move on to the race.
Let's move to the race. If you're interested in disappointment, boy, I got some for you for the race.
Actually, so
So,
before the race
yeah,
started, we had Seb driving around in the old Senna car with his half and half Senna and Ratzenberger helmet on, which was he's just a legend, old Seb. But the other thing that I saw on Twitter was all the V10 cars. This is how they should all sound again. It
yeah.
was like people that was pining for those cars to come back because it was pretty cool. Um, okay, so the race starts, right? Now, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but when you start a race, and I didn't even write it down because me and my son were watching it at the bar, and he was saying to me, "What do you think he's going to say?" Because he probably won't say "lights out" and away we go. He can't use the Crofty thing. He said something like "the lights out." And he went, "It's lights out and foot to the floor" or something like that. I was like, "Yeah, please don't use that again. That's not going to stick."
The lights are on, and now they're turning off, and the foot is to the floor, and I'm Ben. And then Karun couldn't get his microphone to work for a full 5 minutes. I thought that was
And
great.
I'm also I'm sat next to my neighbor Jim that works for NBC, who's constantly looking at this, going, "Who does the camera production for this event?" Because we were all over the grid with like just random camera shots the whole race through. Right, the first attempt at a replay of the start was like the wrong clip, and then there were other
We
things where
we missed a lot of good battles.
we missed like there weren't that many overtakes, but if they were there, we missed them. We almost saw every replay, every overtake in replay. And then at the end, after they've already spoken to Max and done his congratulations, and then we want to hear Lando. All of a sudden, we've got a camera pointing at Max doing an interview for a different TV station. So we've got the audio of Lando speaking, but we've got Max's face. I'm like, oh, I mean, the TV coverage pretty much summed up.
I
This
think what
race
happened is Crofty's like, I'm taking a couple races off this year for the first time in forever. And then Martin's like, well, I'm going to skip the one you're skipping. And then the audio guy's like, well, if they're skipping, I'm skipping. And then the video production guy's like, well, if they're skipping, I'm skipping. And so we had backups in all the positions. And that's okay because this race was boring. And so we got off clean start, one stop strategy. People were on softs, didn't help them. Some people went on hards, didn't help them. And so most people started on the mediums. And we went out there, and by lap 9, Alonso's already pitting. He'd started in the pit lane, and he made like 17 pit stops for reasons I still don't know. He retired the car a little bit at the end there, but just he classified, and man, just people started pitting. We couldn't see it because what happened is they were doing a inbox battle on the left, another production problem. And on the right, we're watching something that didn't matter in the big screen. And so you can't see the driver tracker beyond 15, so you don't know who's in the pits. It's like some people are at the bottom in the pits. I'm just determining it myself using Braille. And then the highlight of the beginning half of the race was basically two things. Albon comes out without the tire affixed, the front right tire. I don't think the Jackman ever got a chance to actually tighten the nut. I think he went on and then he took off. And the guy's like, wait, I wasn't done. And so he had to limp around with the tire that wasn't affixed. And it reminded me of Haas in Australia when Gunter's like, we look like a bunch of wankers because they sent two guys out without the tire on. So that was number one. And then number two, and we were trading some tweets on this, Ahmed Makpao and myself. I commented on his, I should say. The Fernando had a brake fire on the front left brake that was really on fire. Like it was fire. And so he got that put out once he got out of the pit lane. And my last note before the first 20 laps was when they went into Checo's helmet for one of the views, there were a lot of bugs on his visor. And I started thinking, because for 19 or 20 laps, nothing happened. I was thinking, if you're a bug and you end up on like the windshield of a car, it's a bad way to die, but you're a bug, it's a bug. But if you end up on like a visor of an F1 car, that's got to hurt worse because they're going 200 miles an hour as opposed to like 40.
See, I'm going to be more of the vein of if you hit a car on just driving out regularly, there's a chance you're probably still half alive, sort of half squished on the windshield, and you're just waiting, and you know what's going to happen soon. Eventually, the big wiper blade of death comes over, and if it's really bad, that maybe just smears you a bit, but maybe keeps you alive a little bit. So you got this long, drawn-out death just as you're sort of stuck to the front of this windscreen. I'm thinking you hit a helmet at 200 miles an hour, and it's good night, and that's it. It's done.
Right.
I'd rather hit. Me as a bug flying around. If I had to go out, I would rather go out being head-butted by a 200-mile-an-hour F1 helmet than squished on a truck driver's windshield going down.
I've got a joke. I've given up all hope of getting Logan on here. So here was the funeral music for the bug. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Logan's career ending. It's going to be happening soon.
Yeah, I mean, it was. really bizarre because we had like one of the biggest crowds we've had in the Iron Horse for a while, and then I feel like under pressure that I got all these people down here, and this is a really bad race. But thankfully, everyone's kind of drinking and chatting and not even noticing this backdrop of nothing happening. I mean, I didn't really take any notes because I was in the bar, but I kept checking in on yours every now and again. I thought, I don't need to add anything here. You've got like Checo went off roading, covered his car, his wheels in gravel, didn't lose a spot. Like
Didn't even
nothing
lose a
happened.
spot. It didn't make a difference. It just slowed him down from the guy in front of him. Albon gets a penalty. Lando pitted, and that's when the pit started and kind of took us to the middle of the race. Like you said, like not a lot happened. But then when the pit stops happened, at the very least, people came out of order and allowed us, people who hadn't pitted yet, who were ahead of the car that should have been ahead of them on pace. We saw some overtakes, and they were only basically DRS overtakes.
Thank you. I was going to say, so
I know.
So we went from nothing. I think it was lap 19, maybe, that we saw the first overtake that wasn't done off track. And then we had all these flurry of pits. And then we had overtakes, but every single one of them was
bar three.
Fresh
I
tires,
think there were three
fresh tires, DRS, breeze past, and then we did
the Villeneuve chicane. We had a few undertakes.
Yeah, we had a couple. I mean, Yuki and K-Mag, I think, were having a bit of fun, kind of seeing if they could squeeze past at the last moment. That was maybe more towards the end, but so it's all just kind of not a lot's really happening. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this and thinking, well, let's try and pick the positives out of this. At this point in a race, Max is probably 15, 20, 25 or a pit stop in hand, and he's going to pit for soft so he can get the fastest lap. And those are the real Yawnorama races. But he's 7 seconds here. So I'm like, okay, the McLaren pace that we saw in Miami, it doesn't look like a flash in the pan. Oscar has kind of put some moves on, is getting up there as well. Ferrari, for whatever reason, maybe didn't turn the engine up or were worried about race pace. But, they're up there as well. So we've kind of got Max and then 4 cars that all look like they could probably challenge for a race win given the right circumstances. If this was the kind of performance delta for the rest of the season, it wouldn't look as dominating. And then something caught my eye, and I nudged Jim and I went, has Max gone off? And they've just not shown it to us because this is stupid. He went, what do you mean? I said, it was 7.7 seconds the lead last time I looked up, and now it's 5. Why? Where did 2.7 go? And TV hadn't caught on at this point either. Nothing had kind of happened, and it was around 50 something, maybe. I think it was just it must have been the 10 laps to go hadn't flagged up at this point, so it was earlier than 53. When all of a sudden the commentary team suddenly went, Lando seems to be chipping into Max. Is Max saving his tires for the end? Because it was steadily coming down, like 0.2 at a time. You could see up on the screen. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Well, and you nailed it. And so the only other thing I'd say that we skipped in the middle was Checo on those hard tires that were dead as a box of rocks. He was getting eaten up by people on fresher tires. And I was praying that meant that the Red Bulls could be vulnerable. And I didn't mean just on bad tires, but I mean, like to your point, on seeing people around Max. So he was getting just done left and right. You nailed Yuki's thing. And then it was like lap 49, and K-Mag took Joe for 15th. But at this point, Leclerc is getting up Lando's trumpet. And this is exactly what you're talking about, what kick-started Lando cutting into Max. Because then Charles cuts the chicane. He messes up the corner, has to cut the chicane. And at this point, Norris is like, well, if I don't have to worry about him anymore, I might take off into the front and see what I can do instead of defend. And I'm not a big believer in the idea that you drive so defensively you can't catch up to someone else, but it does seem like that at times. And so Lando, no longer on the defense against Charles, exactly like you said, 13 or so laps to go, he starts cutting into that time. And you did point this out, and I was like, yeah, it's not going to get interesting. And then it kept cutting into it. And by like lap 56 or so of the 63, we're down under 2 seconds. And we're like, oh, hang on a second here. But before we close on the Lando Max thing, which we'll get into, why in the world did Mercedes pit George on 53? George was in 6th. Lewis was in 7th. They pitted George, and George had a free stop ahead of whomever was behind, Yuki
Checo.
or...
It was Checo.
Okay.
Lewis would have had to have repassed Checo. So what I think they were doing, they were saying, we've got a window here of a free stop. And from a team perspective, if we finish 6th and 7th, but one of the cars can grab the fastest lap on fresh soft is what I thought they were going to come out on, or any kind of fresh tires, I guess. But the worry with if you chose Lewis was that Lewis didn't have the 30-second window.
Right.
He had 26, I think, at that point, maybe. So he was blatantly going to come out behind Checo and then have to overtake Checo on track to get them back to the status quo of where they were, plus grab the fastest lap. So it looks like the team decided to say, I know this is unfair on George because we're going to cost him a position, but from a team perspective, we're going to keep 6th and 7th and maybe grab fastest lap as well.
But they're 75 points behind McLaren after the race. They have 79 points. McLaren's almost double them with 154. That's who, I think Oscar had the point. They did that for 1 point. They caused George.
Every point counts.
But from a driver perspective, maybe they cost George 2 points, right? Because you drop 2 points going from 6th to 7th, and I know
Mercedes
he gets the fastest lap point. But
Mercedes don't care about drivers' championship. Mercedes care about constructors. So for them, if they can get the fastest lap, they bank an extra point. They don't lose anything.
I'm
They
George,
stay 6
I'm
and 7.
pretty unhappy with that.
No, agree. Because there was some discussion about whether or not they would then, if George does that and gets the fastest lap, will they swap back? And then I think I saw the radio commentary thing come up and say, no, that's not going to happen.
Right. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'd be pissed.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Especially when Lewis is leaving next year.
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway,
that's an absolute team decision, that is, though Mercedes just when we get an extra point.
Boggled my mind, but I'll turn it to you now to get in. You were really excited about the Lando Max thing, so lead us through how this happened.
Well, I was, and I was again disappointed in you for the second time today, where I'm like watching this time fall away, and this is amazing. And you're like, yeah, we'll see. I, like,
I did say that. I didn't think he was going to catch him.
The only thing, I mean, oh my gosh, if we haven't seen Max under pressure for a long time, you got to say he was an absolute boss under pressure. What maybe he did in order to keep that extra gap, I think it was down to 2 things, because that time was falling. It got down to 1.3, and we just had 2 laps that I think defined the race, which was that Lando got a little bit too excited, pushed maybe a little bit too hard, and maybe he felt the pressure rather than Max, and he had a really scruffy lap that dropped him back to 1.7 again, which is nearly half a second dropped, which when you've only got 2 or 3 laps left is mega. Yeah. And I think that same lap, I don't know whether they kept him up to date to say that Lando was struggling, but Max basically depleted almost all of his battery, didn't he? He was obviously using that in those last few laps to kind of then up the pace again to keep him out of DRS. I assume. I have nothing to prove this, but they started putting the battery graphics up there, so I'm thinking, well, Lando's been slicing into his time massively for the last 10 laps, and all of a sudden he's not. And all of a sudden he's not when it gets to 1.2. So I think Max just kept battery for that.
Yeah.
Calculate this in my head. He's going to catch me with 2 or 3 laps to go. I just got to make sure he doesn't get into my DRS, and then I should be able to take this home. And it looks like pretty much what happened. But man, that was fun to see it unfold like that, and see that McLaren pace isn't a one-off limited to only working in a car park in Miami, but actually on a real racetrack. Those McLarens are fast.
They are. They definitely are. You nailed it. And I think it was exciting to have that happen at the end. It did kind of put a positive spin on what was a horrendously boring race.
Oh, it saved the race.
Saved it. Yeah, from being horrendous to being just
semi-horrendous.
Yeah, not good. But it does give me hope. That's why I wanted to make the comment about Checo getting passed so much. And we know his hard tires were old at the point when he was getting passed by everybody. But everyone had a stint on old hard tires, right? No one balanced it perfectly. And so in my mind, watching Max get caught was fantastic. And I know people are going to say all kinds of different reasons, that he wasn't pushing, he had black and white flags, so he was afraid of a 5-second penalty, blah, blah, blah. No. Lando had been saving his tires. That was clear from the conversations earlier. And then he started pushing when Charles got up behind him, because Charles started the domino effect of, I'm going to start pushing, see if I can get Lando. He got close. He scared Lando. Lando starts pushing. He actually says to his race engineer, and Lando's radio is the best. I mean, it's not always all, kind of things like this.
It's broken! It's broken!
But he actually said, his race engineer, Will, tells him, hey, push a little more. You can do more on 8. And he goes, I'm pushing as hard as I can. But then he didn't want to be a jerk. So he goes, thank you. And anyway, it was so much fun. But you're right. Lando may have cooked his tires as well. It was sliding everywhere, doing a little too much to catch Max. But he has the pace. He has the pace.
I don't know if he did.
I have a stat on this too.
I don't know if he did cook the tires, because then after that little wobble, after maybe the battery usage of Max, then actually he does get into DRS finally. He fights back again. So
but he wasn't able to use it because he wasn't.
By the time he caught him, he he didn't have another DRS zone to go through. So, but what I meant was he still actually finishes 0.7 behind him. So after the little wobble and the battery and blah, 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 I think he was back to 1.4. Well, he cuts that in half again by the end of the race to get down to 0.7. So definitely got some pace there. So
yeah, I'm excited for what the future holds. I'm not necessarily Monaco per se, but other tracks.
We won't see anybody use any pace next week, but
so we had Max, Lando, and Charles on the podium, and if we go back to
you nailed it, didn't you? Like 100% bang on.
Well, hold on. So last week you said it'd be Max, Lando, and Checo, and so not only were you not correct on the third person, you picked someone who is about to be my pits. I did get it. I did very much nail it, and that's why I wanted just to highlight that I said it would be Max, Lando, and Charles.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Kudos to you. I think that's
might be the first time we've ever gotten one of these right.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. No, I saw that. I was looking back last week. I was like, as it was coming round, Charles was attacking Lando. I was like, oh, Brian won't want this to be swapped round because his prediction's going to get ruined. I already knew mine was way off because Checo, just in a typical Checo, where I'm sat in the bar trying to show I've got some kind of knowledge, and everyone's there saying, Checo's got to pit soon. I was like, well, I don't think Checo should pit soon because if he's going to be making these hards go for as long as physically possible and then come out on rocket ship tires, he's going to need to make these last for another sort of 5 to 10 laps, because what's the point of pitting Checo like 5 laps after everybody else has got onto fresh rubber and he's been eaten back up again? It's like they're just going to hang him out to dry and then I almost don't finish his sentence and the radio message comes up on the bottom of the screen, Checo box. And everyone looks at me. I'm like, okay, shows you what I know. And
Checo then finished 8th.
Wait there, because we missed this. He comes out on fresh mediums. He goes off like a rocket ship and he's passing like 3 cars, blah, blah, blah. He's working his way through all the ones that are directly in front of him. And this seems to be the real mental block for Checo, because we've now seen a pattern that this has happened multiple times. He gets past all the people that are in his line of sight. It's like if he can see the dominoes falling ahead of him, he can take them. Then he gets past whoever it was, and it's like, right, you got 26 seconds to Lewis now. And we're like, right, okay, here we go. Roll up my sleeves. I'm going to eat into this 26 seconds in no time whatsoever. And I think he ends up finishing pretty much 20
seconds behind Lewis. Yep.
It probably wasn't. Was it 20 seconds behind Lewis?
Yeah.
So what happens to him when he gets into clean air and he can't see the car in front anymore? He loses the ability to drive fast.
I don't know. I do not know. I don't know. But any other thoughts from the race? I just want to say one last thing before we get to our pits and King of the Pits. I do want to say one more thing. Kudos to Albon. Tire not on. Limps around the track, comes back in. They fix the tires. He goes out. He's having all kinds of problems. And that set of tires that was not affixed correctly was no longer usable because one of them, the front right, was damaged. Now he's down a set of the hards he needs. He's on like used hards or new mediums. He's on the wrong tire. He's out there. He's having some problems with the car. It had been, as you said already, red flagged in FP1. It's just not working for him. And the commentary says, you know what? They expected him to retire. He's already a lap and a half behind on like 15 laps in. He's like, what's the point? And it's just mileage on the car. But I love the fact that Alex is like, if you guys are all right letting me race, I'm going to keep racing. And he went out there and just raced for another 40 laps, and he just went for it. He's like, I'm a racer. Let me go out and race and practice, learn the track, learn the car. Let me get better at my craft. And then they did have to retire the car because whatever mechanical gremlin was out there was getting worse. But he didn't just mail it in. He didn't just go, you know what? Oh, I have someone on the radio tell me I have some kind of floor damage and we can retire the car and the FIA won't care and I can go to my motorhome and grab a shower. He didn't do that. And I love that because you're not racing for anything when you're 2 laps behind. But he was out there just doing his thing, and I love that about Albon.
Yeah, and I really hope there is something. Albon seems like an absolute great guy, great talent, and the fact that he's committed to a multi-year deal obviously means that he sees something behind the scenes that James Vowles has got lined up, maybe, that Williams are moving in the right direction. So I do hope that this kind of sticking with it through a time where Albon could leave and go somewhere and get a much better drive, but the fact that he's willing to stay, willing to go multi-year, willing to drive the car around today for probably no gain whatsoever other than maybe data for the engineers and him, and like you say, as a driver. I think it shows him in a good light, and I hope it means that Williams have got some kind of McLaren-esque return to form maybe, because McLaren were down in the doldrums for a while and seem to be coming back now. It'd be great to see Williams getting back up near the front again. So do you know what? I am excited about a potential Valtteri and Alex lineup.
Oh my God. Cool. If that happens, I mean, could you imagine if that happened? Just having...
This is Valtteri Bottas, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
On the Williams team, and then we could get Albon on.
Valix or Al Bottas? What's there's no like Carlando that works too well, is
we'll
there?
Figure it out.
We'll work it out.
Valix.
Yeah, Valix. That might have to be the one.
Oh, that's terrible as well.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Anything else, Rob, from the race before we hit the pits?
No, let's go King of the Pits and Pits. Let's rack it up.
King of the Pits first.
Hey, you're the king of the pits.
All right, so since I played the sound, that means I'll go first. My King of the Pits is an easy one. He was driver of the day. He made the boring race pseudo-interesting. His name is Lando F. Norris. If he hadn't had that charge at the end, I might have given this race an F. And he also showed that Max is vulnerable, at least potentially, on certain tracks. But the McLaren has pace. Oscar showed us, but Lando's the one who made it fascinating for me. So even though he didn't win the race, I got Lando Norris as my king. Who you got?
Okay, so I think it was Nimrod on the Discord made some remark about a poor car, a car with bad setup, but with Max behind the wheel is always going to be better than whichever way around, a faster car with whatever. He was trying to elude the fact that probably the only way the Red Bull would have a good weekend, I think, was the car in the hands of Max and not Checo because of what Max can do with it. And we always don't like to give Max King of the Pits when he wins because it'd be boring and we give him King of the Pits every week. But I'm going to give it to him this week because I think first time we saw him under pressure, and when he did come massively under pressure, plus not only was he massively under pressure because Lando's catching him, he also knows he can't even risk pushing too hard and violate track limits again because he's already on the black and white flag, and he runs track limits one more time, he's going to get 5-second penalty and he's toast. Yeah. So push too hard, you're in the gravel. Push too hard, you get a track's limits. He's obviously managing that battery and just hoping to squeeze every last bit of juice out of it to keep Lando at bay. So I'm going to say, do you know what? We've seen Max disappear off into the distance, but we saw him absolutely stick to his guns and bring that home today when Lando, who's so close to being my King of the Pits, but being as I don't give Max probably enough credit, I'm just going to give him the King of the Pits today.
He deserves it. He deserves it. And now let's look at the flip side. The pits.
You're the pits.
All right. So this is a hard one, right? And you can go first on these next week. But this was a hard one for me because I have two people in mind. And it's Checo is high on the list. I mean, he finished 8th. He qualified 11th. But the car is supposed to be fast, Checo. Look what Max can do with it. And like you say, he just runs into these walls where he just gets stuck in no man's land. And whether he can't see the car in front of him or what, I don't understand it. He went off-roading again. The cool-down room, when they saw that, was funny when they're all watching it and they don't want to say anything too. And they're like, oh, Checo. But the other person that I am actually going to give it to is the Aston Martin upgrade department, who once again affixed downgrades to the car. Fernando was lost. He was in no man's land. I know, don't yell at me. I know Lance finished 9th, okay? I understand that and got a couple points, but look who finished behind Lance, right? And I'm not knocking anybody, but it was Yuki, Nico, Kevin, Daniel, Esteban, and Joe were right behind Lance. Lance should beat those guys in the Aston Martin. He did what he was supposed to do. And so, and he made no impression on anyone above him. So Fernando took 17 pits. He had 3 pit stops, okay? The only person who had more was Alex, who had 5. Literally, he was counted for 5. So Fernando, 3 pits. He was a lap behind. He finished 19th only because Alex retired and had no wheels at times. I give it to the Aston Martin upgrade department. 2 for 2. Last year and this year, the car gets worse when they put new stuff on it. And I recognize it's a learning game, right? You put stuff on, but come on, man. You can't go backwards so many times.
No, I'm absolutely giving it to exactly the same thing because I was looking at it, like you say, Stroll in an upgraded Aston Martin is 0.4 of a second ahead of Yuki. Yuki, another couple of laps, Yuki gets him. Another second or so is behind his Nico, and not much further behind is K-Mag and Danny Rick. So he's really leading home a procession of 4 or 5 cars there that are pretty much right up his trumpet. Looking forward in his highly upgraded car, he's finishing 7 seconds off George Russell, who, by the way, took an extra pit stop just to grab a set of tires. So take 30 seconds off that. We're really looking at the car in front, which is Lewis, which he's over 20, no, worse than that, like 40 seconds behind Lewis or something. It's just like, what on earth and this year, it's not even like they had the stellar start and then
Right. It's not like they were podium. It was
yeah. It's like last year it was podium. Will the upgrade give us a shot at winning? No. Okay, take them off. We can go back to being a semi-decent car. This year the hopes were pinned on it because the car hasn't been brilliant this year. They've come along with the upgrades, and if you're surely tomorrow morning in the office, Stroll Senior has got to get them all in a room and go, what the F is that? I mean, 2 in a row. Do I just need to sack you all? Because I've got the money to go and hire a new... I've got a newie maybe flying around as well. But
I was thinking the same thing. Like, literally, the race was so boring, I actually got up off the couch and went and got, like, a cookie at one point, and I got a fresh soda. Normally, I'm glued to the TV like a nerd who can't, leave the thing that I love. I'm out walking around outside the TV room thinking, I'm like, I wonder if the offer to Newey just doubled from Lawrence.
I wonder if Newey was a bug. What kind of impact?
Okay. Let's hear from Paul. If you
on.
think we were a little down on the race, even though we found positives, just hang on for what you're going to hear from Mr. Pitside. Awesome. And Paul, thank you, man. Let me thank you in advance for sending this in.
I'm going to record this from a very noisy airport, sadly. But it's just what it is. I've got to get out of Bologna Airport. After arguably the worst race I've seen, it was pretty dreadful. Nothing really happened. It was almost a worse Monaco, because at least in Monaco you expect it. Yeah, okay, Lando got close at the end, but, one-stop strategy. If there's anything positive to say, I mean, the food's okay. Apart from that, as I said, the whole weekend, we've had a sprint race, we've come back from a sprint race, and they're okay, and we've come into a really boring double Friday practice session where nothing really happens. The whole thing was just rubbish, wasn't it? I have nothing else to say. Normally I'm positive. I can be positive. The food's great. That's it. Race, terrible. That was a disaster.
That is it. That is the
That's normally we get like a 3 or 4 minute
a minute of Paul being frustrated.
I was gonna say he's hated it so much we haven't even got any backstory to the surrounding area or any travel facts, because he's just obviously so annoyed and wants to get out of there and get home, and I can't blame him.
I can't either. And I can't use Slaphouse for the SAP stats this week. I think, again, Lando saved it, but we're going to go with the Nokia. It's about as good as this race was. All right, SAP stats, the Emilia-Romagna 2024 Grand Prix edition. So as we kind of referenced, a few of these came up already. Verstappen matches Schumacher in winning 3 consecutive Imola races. It was his 59th Grand Prix victory and his 49th win since the start of 21. Dear God. The Dutchman scores 104th career podium ahead of Kimi for 6th on the all-time list. And this was a stat that Sean Kelly sent out on Twitter during the race as it was closing. Verstappen's career win percentage is now 30.7%, surpassing Lewis Hamilton's 30.4 for current best on the grid. And I'll be honest with you, Lewis ain't going to be winning a lot of races anytime soon unless they have George Pitt from first. Prior to Miami, Verstappen's victories this year, and this is the one I referenced I wanted to come to. Prior to Miami, his average winning margin was 14 seconds. And now Lando wins a race, and yes, you can say he had floor damage, yada, yada, but this one was a second. So I am...
Wasn't even a second.
Correct. I'm so excited for where this is going. And I know this race was a stinker, and I know we're about to have another stinker that we're going to preview, but we got a great quali coming at us here soon, and maybe Monaco could surprise us. It's the third consecutive race that seen Verstappen and Norris finish 1-2. So the buddies are having fun standing on the podium. It's this one I did not know. It's Norris's third straight Imola podium. Is that possible? I don't even remember him being on the podium 2 other times at Imola. It was a 17th career podium finish, and he was the 3rd consecutive driver of the day. I didn't realize he had the one before Miami as well. It was McLaren's best finish at Imola since Kimi was 2nd in 2003. And for the one, yeah, I know, right? And the stat that we did hear a lot on TV, Leclerc was 3rd. It was their first podium since Schumacher won there in 2006. And then it was Leclerc's 4th podium finish of the season. He's 2nd in the Drivers' Championship. When they said that on TV, I didn't believe it either. And I had to go look, and it is correct. He moved ahead of Checo because of the disastrous day for Checo. So now it's Max on 161, Charles on 113, and Checo at 107, and Lando at 101. So there's a very real chance very soon Checo's going to be 4th in the Drivers' Championship, which would be the death knell for his Red Bull career, in my humble opinion. But I think that also means Leclerc's finished in the top 4 every race. And a stat I did not know, Carlos was 5th. He's yet to finish outside the top 5. So Ferrari deserves some extra credit for the consistency with which their drivers are finishing these races. And I don't just mean that they finish them, I mean where they finish them. It was Checo's, his 8th was 8th. It was his worst result of the year. Lance scored points in his 150th Grand Prix start. And Yuki got points for the 4th time in 5 races. That's awesome for Yuki and for RB and what we're seeing RB do. Yeah. Any thoughts on the stats, Robbie?
No, just
Have I ever called you that? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think I'll do it again.
I wanted to
Didn't
gloss
feel right.
over it. It didn't sit well. But I like seeing Yuki there again. It's interesting what's going on there because this week had, despite the fact that it was a rubbish race, we got a few little story threads, and you mentioned it. You know, the Danny and Checo in qualifying, the battle that Red Bull senior team wanted to see. But then you've still got this Yuki Danny storyline going on, and Yuki just is not giving that one up to say that Dan is the necessarily shoo-in to take the other seat because he's still outperforming him. Danny's had that little ripple in the sprint at Miami where we went, we got the old Danny Rick back, and then race day. And then today couldn't get near Yuki again. I mean, he's finished 13th, so not too many positions behind. And actually, to be fair to him, not too many seconds behind on the race. But Danny, if he is supposed to be the alpha male there in that team, he's the one that should be taking it to Yuki every week. And Yuki isn't just not giving it up. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. Fantasy is still calculating, as it says.
I made so, by the way, got a public apology here for Alex Albon. So I updated my team to dump Checo. Yay, great move. Free up that budget so that I could afford constructors of McLaren and Ferrari. So, I'm covering my bases here. McLaren and Ferrari constructors with Max in there as ×2 with, I think it's Yuki, Danny, Rick, and Valtteri with 1 spot left where I needed another bargain basement. And I was looking at it and going, okay, Hulkenberg or Alex. Hulkenberg or Alex. Hulkenberg or Alex. FP3 came along and Alex went and dropped it in like about 8th or something. I was like, that Williams is back. Alex, you're in. So everything that transpired this weekend, Alex, unfortunately, is because I put you into my team.
Well,
Go ahead,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, I always have to have one clanger that, I mean, technically, I thought freeing Checo from my team might see an upturn in performance, but no, that one really didn't. So anyway, yeah.
So I had, as I said, Friday I missed all practice. I was working, and then my daughters had a dance recital, and I didn't get home till about 9:30. So I didn't even think of quali and what I wanted to do for my lineup. What I ended up doing was woke up right before the quali, and there were some technical challenges at work that I needed to focus on, and so I had to pick between trying to get my fantasy team in and paying attention to it, spending time on it, or doing a little work. I did a little work, and so what ended up happening is I just reran the same team from last week, but I liked it. I looked at it. I had Lando as my main driver. I had Ferrari and Red Bull. I felt like I'd had a good diversity kind of strategy covering everyone I needed. Now, I wasn't going to hit a home run, but I didn't think I'd fall down too hard is really what I went for, just not screwing it up. I had K-Mag, Nico, I had Joe, and Danny Rick. So, yeah, we'll see. It's going provisional as we speak, but we'll get the close out.
What's your provisional points at the moment?
172.
See, mine there, because of the -20, I'd have beaten you by a point if Alex Albon had decided not to retire. But as he did, I got 153 provisional at the moment because of my Albon disaster.
Well, I'll take 172 in a race in a time where I had 4 minutes to basically stare at it and go, keep it like it is.
Right. Okay, then. So next week, if you didn't like the lack of overtaking today,
can we sell you on doing it again?
Yeah, although bizarrely, I know this is all completely just stupid romanticizing a race, but I love Monaco, and I know there will be lots of overtaking, but I like the jeopardy the walls being so close bring into it. We know there'll be some overtaking, but there won't be much. It's like you say, this is the most important quali weekend of the season. You need to see people getting good track position because it's so important here. Races have run around the streets of Monaco since 1929, and we will have 78 laps of, I think, the shortest circuit on the calendar, 2.074 miles, 19 corners. And yeah, I mean, what else is to say about Monaco? It's streets, it's hills, it's tunnels, it's yachts, it's marinas and swimming pools. And even though it doesn't, I mean, obviously it does challenge the drivers in a very, very precise way rather than flat out speed. Drivers absolutely love this race. Yep. Like every driver, I think, wants to have a Monaco win in their career. It's just.
Well, speaking of Senna earlier, I mean, he was a Monaco specialist, right? He just dominated when he was there. And our Monegasque has had just an unbelievable set of bad luck. I think last year we actually took like part of an episode and went in deep in all the problems Charles has had in his home territory. So can we please hope that Charles has a good Monaco, even if he doesn't win? I don't want him on pole, hitting the wall, and then going up to the grid after they've done a once over on the car, and like you're fine the next day. He goes out there and has to retire before he starts on the formation lap. I don't want to see him leading the race and then coming in twice for wet tires and then dry tires and coming out fourth and never, sniffing anything again. I don't want to see that. It's like if he finishes third on merit, fine, but don't screw up his race. Don't have bad luck. That's what also I'm hoping for next week.
Yeah, and here's one for you, which I don't really think has got any kind of basis in it. But I was just looking at the notes we got here where we said, Monaco is part of the Triple Crown that includes the Indy 500 and the Le Mans 24. And Graham Hill is the only Triple Crown winner, and Montoya and Alonso are active drivers to have won 2 of the 3. Well, given that Max seemed to spend, after quali and before the race, he spent his evening on a sim endurance race. Is he getting some practice in for the Le Mans, do you think? Do you think Max is going to quit F1 because he wants to go and get the Triple Crown?
I mean, can you get the Triple Crown? Can you do it virtually? Can it be an esports situation?
I don't think so. No. But everyone keeps saying that Max is likely to not be in F1 for the rest of his career, but he just loves to race. He just loves racing. Right. And he never really gives many interviews about what he does aspire to. And this just got me thinking, do you think someone that just loves racing but not a particular series out of anything else, would Max go for the Triple Crown, do you think?
Well, I don't know. You know what we can do? We can ask him when he comes on our podcast, right?
And then Max Verstappen does get into the lead. Had to get onto the dirty side of the track there.
So, am I previewing something that may happen?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. So stats, as you mentioned, Senna's top with 6 wins, Schumacher and Graham Hill on 5, Prost with 4. Current drivers that have got wins there are Hamilton with 3, Alonso and Max have both got 2. Danny Rick's got 1, and Sergio's got 1. Constructors, McLaren lead the way with 15, Ferrari with 9, Merck, Red Bull, Brabham, Lotus with 7. So yeah, I don't even remember last year's race really. I kind of went and dipped in and kind of read the review, and it was Max won it. Max got pole. It rained a bit. Sainz was a little bit unhappy about a pit stop strategy that saw him fall behind Ocon, giving Ocon the third place on the podium behind Max and Alonso. I don't even remember it.
I remember quali, and like I said, I was actually trading texts with a couple people about the race today, and we realized the best racing we're going to see over these 2 weekends is Saturday in Monaco. Sunday at Imola and Saturday at Imola and Sunday at Monaco. The best we're going to get is Saturday at Monaco, and I cannot wait. I will make it. It's also Memorial Day weekend here in the States, or as y'all in the UK would say, a bank holiday. And so we don't have work on Monday, and so I cannot wait for the Monaco weekend, and especially kicking it off Saturday morning with quali. It'll be fun. But I do remember last year's quali. Remember, Matt, I think this is the one where Alonso was on pole, provisional pole, and Max had like a yellow sector
that's
2.
right.
And we're all thinking for these next 40 seconds, we're like, oh my God, Fernando's going to be on pole. And if you're on pole at Monaco, you can convert that to a win. And that Aston Martin hadn't been downgraded yet. So it looked good. And then Max put in the world's greatest third sector.
That's
took
right. He
pole,
rode
broke
the
our
walls all
hearts.
the way around.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do remember that. And then the bit I was reading about the rain, I didn't really remember this bit, was the rain hit midway through, it said. And apparently Max slid on his mediums and grazed the wall quite hard. And I don't really remember that. But
I don't remember. All I remember was the year prior when Pierre was on the wet tires of the inners, and he was passing people left and right. And there is a rumor. My friend Paul sent me a text. There's a rumor of rain next weekend, so keep.
There's
your
always
eye.
a rumor of rain in Monaco. That's the great thing
well,
about it.
The forecast from a week out says rain, so we'll see what that forecast.
The sun
does
can be shining over that bay, and it's right in a rain shadow on that mountain, and the clouds come rumbling in over the top of that, and you go from glorious sunshine with everybody sunbathing on their yachts to having to run for cover because it's a monsoon. So, yeah, I mean, I like the race. I know it's processional, but something about watching those cars race down those narrow streets at high speed, and also I like watching the increasing desperation of somebody trying to make a lunge at a couple of places. One is the first corner. I also like the approach to before you come into the hairpin in front of the hotel, where it tends to switch to the overhead shot. That corner there to get into the hairpin has got a nice little lunge zone, and then the other one can be like down the hill into the tunnel entrance, or out of the tunnel and into the chicane. Once you pretty much get into then the swimming pool complex and Razcas and stuff, lots of people look like they're going to have a look, but I think that's more posturing to try to put the other driver off. We don't tend to see a lot around there, but there's a couple of good lunge spots, which means that there's a good chance of a K-Mag or a Yuki getting too feisty and eating wall and safety car coming out. So
yeah, I agree with you. The desperation does. So Devot, the first corner, I can never pronounce these right, is a good one where people get desperate. But Portier as well, right before the tunnel. It always feels like someone's coming out of the hairpin. They think they've got the pace and they go for it, and it never works out for them. And you nailed it as well. When they come out of the tunnel into the chicane, somebody always overcooks it. Sometimes in quali, sometimes, but they come flying, steaming through, and they can't make it.
It's go big or go home, because you either come flying out of the tunnel because you've got a good toe, and you come up and at the inside, you make it stick. You manage to not ride the curbs, and it's like the world's best chef kiss overtake. Or you completely miss the chicane and have to go through it because the tires just don't want to know and slow down. There is no in between if you try to put a move on in that corner, right?
Do you remember when Joe came out of the tunnel and his car went completely sideways and he saved it? Then he made a joke about needing a new pair of pants. Like, oh man! So again, quali at Monaco is just chef's kiss.
Yeah, well, I will back you on that. The qualifying is amazing, but I will actually, even if there was not a single overtake, I would definitely enjoy Monaco next week more than I enjoyed Imola today.
Yeah,
because I think because the expectation, like Paul said, because we expect it to be a procession and not have much overtake, and you've got that coached into you from 30 years of watching it, then not that the bar is set low, because that really doesn't advertise it very well, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I do. I'm actually starting to think about nice morning beverages that maybe I could have since I got the day off the next day. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Rob, anything else from you for this episode?
No, I am all good.
Man, I am too. That was, again, not the greatest race. Lando made it interesting at the end. There were some interesting storylines that Rob talked about. We hope you enjoyed talking about it with us, thinking about it with us. We can't wait to do this again in a week's time to recap Monaco. We'll have the fantasy results from Imola, and in that time, we hope everyone has a wonderful week. Be well, be safe. Take care, everybody.